The caustic air of Proxima B9 burned her lungs with every breath, tasting of metal and ash. The battlefield stretched before her like a wound carved into the planet's smoking craters, shattered mechs half buried in blackened soil, and bodies twisted into shapes no anatomy should allow. Once, this had been the front line. Now it was a graveyard. Alxi Vinsal dragged herself through the wreckage, inch by inch, her six-fingered hand clawing at the jagged ground. Each movement sent fresh shocks of agony racing up her body. Where her right leg had been was only a mangled stump, seared shut in a desperate act with her own plasma pistol. The cauterized flesh still steamed faintly in the cold alien wind. Blood the color of molten amber seeped sluggishly from beneath the crude bandage she'd torn from her uniform. She knew the truth. The bleeding had slowed, not because she'd succeeded, but because her body was giving up. Her bioluminescent skin patterns, once alive with flowing violet light, had dulled to a grayish flicker. Each dimming pulse was a countdown. She stopped crawling, her strength leaking away like the heat from her veins. Her faceted eyes, clouded with pain, scanned the horizon where her unit had vanished hours ago. Gone, left her here like discarded equipment. Not even a glance back. "We do not rescue the broken," the voice of her commander whispered from memory. "The broken do not belong." Alxi tried to laugh, but the sound came out thin and sharp, like glass under strain. "So this is how it ends," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the wind. She had fought, served, killed without hesitation, because that was the Rian way. Efficiency above all. Compassion was weakness. Now abandoned, she understood what those words really meant. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She was debris. Something shifted in the distance, a crunch of boots against scorched soil. Her heart lurched. Instinct drove her trembling hand toward her sidearm, but her holster was empty, lost in the chaos of the blast. Helpless, she turned her head, expecting the sleek silhouette of a Rian retrieval squad or worse, a human executioner. "Don't move." The voice was deep, steady, and spoke in the common trade tongue. Not Rian, human. Alxi froze, her breath catching. Her species propaganda screamed in her mind. Humans are barbarians. Savage, unpredictable. They will tear you apart for sport. The figure stepped into view, framed by the ruinous glow of burning wreckage, broad-shouldered, armored in dust-streaked combat gear. His helmet was askew, revealing a face streaked with grime, sweat cutting pale lines across tanned skin. A white and red armband marked him medical corps. The man crouched beside her with practiced calm, his eyes sweeping over her wound. His voice softened. "You're bleeding out." She stared at him in disbelief, throat tight with fear and confusion. "I am your enemy," she managed, her translator converting her crystalline speech into halting trade language. "Not right now, you're not," he said, pulling a kit from his back. His hands moved fast, efficient, pulling out a vial, a bandage, a gleaming injector. "Right now, you're just someone who needs help." Her mind reeled. Help? That word had no place here. Not on this battlefield. Not between enemies. Why? The question slipped out, raw and trembling. His eyes met hers then human eyes, impossibly bright against the ruin around them. "Because that's what makes us human." The injector hissed against her skin. A flood of icy relief numbed the fire in her nerves. Her vision swam, and for the first time since the mine tore her apart, her fear ebbed, replaced by something far more dangerous. Hope. She let her head rest against the cracked earth, watching him work as darkness crept at the edges of her sight. A human, bending rules, risking everything, to save her the enemy. It made no sense. It defied everything she'd been taught. As the world slipped away, his voice anchored her in the storm. "Stay with me. You're going to be okay." And For reasons she couldn't explain, Alxi believed him. The world swam back to Alxi in jagged fragments, heat, shadows, and the muffled thrum of machinery. For a moment, she thought she had crossed into the silent dark of death. But no, the scent of sterilizers, sharp and alien, filled her senses. Something smooth and soft pressed against her back a cot. A blanket lay across her torso, coarse, but warm against her chilled skin. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim amber glow of a compact shelter. The walls curved inward, metallic panels reinforced with camouflage plating. Holographic readouts blinked across a terminal, their characters indecipherable to her. Medical instruments lay scattered across a steel counter. It was too clean, too efficient to be the work of a scavenger. Movement drew her attention. The human, the one from the battlefield, stood with his back to her, removing his helmet. His dark hair was damp, plastered to his neck, and his uniform bore stains both crimson and amber. Her amber. He was cleaning something, a tool, its edge glinting like ice. Alxi shifted instinctively, a low hiss escaping her throat as pain knifed up her body. Immediately, his head whipped around, eyes locking onto hers. "You're awake," he said, voice calm but edged with relief. He crossed the cramped space and knelt beside her cot. Up close, his face was younger than she expected. Lines of fatigue carved deep by long days and longer nights. His irises were a pale storm gray, unsettling, yet steady. Alxi tried to push herself up, pride fighting weakness, but her arms trembled and collapsed beneath her. The blanket slid, revealing the bandaged stump of her leg. She froze, bioluminescent, markings flickering in shame. Her people saw imperfection as a stain on honor. She was a shattered blade, useless. "Don't," he murmured, pressing a firm hand to her shoulder. "You'll tear the seals." "You should have left me," she rasped, each word vibrating like cracked crystal through her translator implant. "That is what we do." His brow furrowed, confusion flashing in his eyes. "We? My unit," she whispered. Her throat tightened. "They abandoned me." "It is efficient." For a moment, his jaw worked silently, as if wrestling with the alien cruelty of that logic. Then he said, low and fierce, "That's not how I do things." She stared at him, trying to decipher the motive behind his words. Her training offered no answer. Compassion was not a tactical resource. It was unnecessary, dangerous. "Why?" she asked, voice breaking on the single syllable. "Because I didn't sign up to watch people die when I can stop it." He leaned back slightly, running a weary hand through his hair. "Name's Theo. Lieutenant Theodore Maxwell, UNMC combat medic." She swallowed hard. Her throat burned, dry as scorched earth. "Alxi Vinsel," she said after a long pause, voice faint. "Combat engineer, 4th Expansion Battalion." "Not that it matters." Theo's mouth tightened into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It matters to me." Before she could respond, a sharp sting flared in her shoulder. She flinched, realizing too late he had slipped a slender injector against her skin. Coolness bloomed through her veins, muting the agony that had hollowed her out since the blast. Her rigid muscles eased despite herself. "What was that?" "Pain management," Theo said simply, disposing of the empty vial. "Your metabolism eats through our standard meds in half the time. I'll have to keep adjusting the doses." Her gaze drifted downward again. The stump where her leg had been was swathed in layers of pale human fabric, reinforced with some synthetic material that clung like living skin. The sight ignited a jagged edge of despair. "I am broken," she murmured, almost to herself. Theo crouched so his face was level with hers. His voice was steady, deliberate, as if anchoring a truth he needed her to believe. "You're alive." "That's not broken." She shook her head weakly. Among my people, function is identity. I cannot fight, cannot build. I am nothing. Then your people are wrong. The quiet conviction in his tone startled her more than any weapon could have. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the shelter's life support unit. Theo's hands moved with calm precision, checking the integrity of her bandages, scanning her vitals with a device that hummed and clicked in tones alien to her ears. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, as if she were something fragile instead of a soldier scarred by war. Finally, he broke the silence. I can't fix everything here, he admitted. Supplies are limited, and your physiology. Well, it's like learning a new language while blindfolded. He hesitated, gray eyes meeting hers with quiet resolve. But there's something I can try. If it works, you'll walk again. Her heart stuttered in disbelief. Walk? Theo nodded, his expression grim but determined. We have experimental biosynth tech designed to adapt to unknown biology. I wasn't supposed to use it. It's classified, reserved for high-ranking human officers only. His voice hardened. But I didn't drag you out of hell just to watch you wither. The words struck something deep, something dangerous, inside her. Why risk everything? Theo's reply came without hesitation, a simple truth in a world built on lies, because it's the right thing to do. Alxi stared at him, trying to comprehend this alien notion, this defiance of logic, of survival calculus. She found no answer, only the steady rhythm of his breath, the warmth of his hand brushing against hers as he adjusted a monitor dot, and for the second time since the mine had taken her leg, Alxi felt the sharp, piercing ache of something she had thought extinguished. Hope. Asterisk. Alxi floated in a haze of chemical warmth, drifting in and out of something like sleep, but never quite reaching it. Sounds filtered through in fragments, the whir of machinery, the muted curse of a human voice, the hiss of sterilizers. Sometimes, she felt heat blooming in her nerves like fire. Other times, only the cold, relentless hum of metal against metal. When her vision cleared enough to focus, Theo was there, hunched over a table cluttered with tools and glowing instruments. His hands moved with controlled urgency, precision born not from routine, but from sheer willpower. Every few minutes, he would glance at her vitals on the display, and in those brief flickers of eye contact, Alxi saw the truth, exhaustion carved deep into his features, but a stubborn light still burning in his storm-gray eyes. Her throat felt raw when she finally spoke. What are you doing? Theo set down a scalpel-like instrument, scrubbing his palms across his face before answering. Keeping my promise. His voice was hoarse, heavy with hours without rest. You're stable, but the cauterization damaged more tissue than I thought. If we wait, necrosis sets in. So, he gestured toward the device, occupying half the cramped shelter, a sleek, coffin-like machine humming with a faint blue glow. We're going to graft you something better than a prosthetic. Something alive synthetic, but bonded to you. Her pulse spiked, bioluminescent patterns flaring in anxious bursts along her arms. That is not possible, she whispered. Theo met her gaze steadily. It wasn't, until now. Before she could ask more, pain lanced up from the stump where her leg had been. She cried out, her voice shattering like brittle crystal, and Theo was there instantly, his hand firm on her shoulder. Easy. It's just the neural mapping. The biosynth is learning you. Through the translucent casing of the machine, Alxi glimpsed something taking shape, a framework of alloy and luminous filaments, pulsing with faint color as if alive. It didn't resemble any Rian design she knew. It was raw alien yet. Strangely beautiful. Theo noticed her staring. Adaptive lattice. It builds itself based on your neural patterns. He hesitated, then added, theoretically, it should integrate like a natural limb, but it's never been tested on your species. And if it fails? Her voice was barely audible. Then, he paused, jaw tightening. Then I try something else. Alxi studied him, trying to reconcile the contradictions of this human. He spoke like someone who expected nothing in return, yet risked everything. In her world, every act carried calculation, every kindness a debt. But here he was, gambling his career, maybe his life for her. For an enemy, hours bled into an eternity of pain and flickering consciousness. At times, her body arched against restraints as the biosynth fused with her tissues, her cries ripping through the sterile air. Theo's voice anchored her through every wave of agony. Stay with me, Alxi. Just a little more. You're stronger than this. When the storm finally broke, she woke to silence thick, humming silence broken only by her own ragged breaths. For a moment, she lay still, afraid to look. Then slowly, hesitantly, she lifted the thin blanket covering her lower body. Her heart stuttered. Where the jagged stump had been now extended, a limb unlike anything she had imagined. Sleek, elegant lines of pale alloy merged seamlessly into her flesh, veins of translucent material, glowing with bioluminescent pulses that mirrored her own patterns. When she focused, the pulses brightened, synchronized as if the limb were not foreign, but hers. It works, Theo said softly from the doorway, his voice rough but laced with triumph. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days dark. Crescents beneath his eyes, uniform stained and rumpled, but when he smiled, it was like light cutting through storm clouds. Alxi swallowed hard, struggling to find words. This is me? It's you, he said, and something more. Tentatively, she willed the limb to move. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a low mechanical whisper, the foot flexed. The knee bent, the limb obeyed. A sound escaped her fragile, stunned, almost musical, like wind striking crystal. Theo stepped closer, crouching beside her. Your nervous system's still adapting. Give it time. Alxi stared at him, at the human who had crossed every boundary to give her back what she had lost. Why? She whispered again, the same question as before, but now heavier with meaning. He didn't look away, because walking away wasn't an option. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, thick, electric, alive. Alxi lowered her gaze to the limb, all rippling through her like heat. For the first time since the mind tore her apart, she didn't feel broken. She felt whole, and that terrified her more than the pain ever had. The outpost shuddered with a sound like distant thunder. Dust sifted from the seams of the metal ceiling, and a low vibration rolled beneath the floor. Alxi's head snapped toward the noise, her bioluminescent patterns flaring instinctively in alarm. Theo was already at the console, fingers flying across the interface. His voice was sharp, controlled. Damn it, perimeter sensors just lit up? Rien? Her voice cracked, translating through the implant like wind through broken glass. Theo didn't answer right away. His jaw was rigid, gray eyes darting over the feed before he finally looked at her. Not just Rion, human signatures too. Both sides, and they're moving fast. The words settled in her gut like lead. They hunt us, together. Theo didn't deny it. Instead, he crossed the room in 3 quick strides and dropped to one knee beside her cot. Can you stand? Alxi stared at him, then down at her new limb. The biosynth gleamed softly in the dim light, veins of pale luminescence threading through alloy like captured starlight. Her heart's pounded. She hadn't tested it beyond a few tentative movements. I do not know, she admitted. Time to find out. Theo's voice was all urgency now, hands moving to unclip the restraints from her recovery frame. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they're on top of us. The air grew heavy, crackling with an undercurrent of inevitability. Alxie swung her legs over the side of the cot, the weight of her body dragging against untested connections. The biosynth knee bent smoothly, startling her. Theo's arm slid around her waist, steadying her as she pushed upright. The contact seared through her like a live current, unexpected and confusing. But there was no time to dwell on it. Her balance faltered, but Theo tightened his hold. Easy, one step at a time. She took a breath and focused. The leg obeyed. One step, then another. Pain bloomed along the grafted nerves, sharp enough to make her vision swim, but beneath it was something else power, a new equilibrium. She gritted her teeth, forcing her alien physiology and human tech into harmony. Good, Theo murmured, his voice close to her ear. You've got this. A tremor rippled through the outpost, stronger this time. From outside came the faint whine of engines descending. Alxie froze, patterns flaring in a pulse of fear. Theo didn't hesitate. He grabbed his medpack, slung it over one shoulder, and shoved a plasma sidearm into his belt. Let's move. They pushed out into the Proxima dusk, the acidic wind biting at their exposed skin. The horizon glowed with ember light where fires still smoldered from the last battle. In the distance, she saw them tiny sparks against the storm-gray sky, growing brighter by the second. Dropships, dozens of them. Theo's hand closed around hers, tugging her toward the jagged ravine beyond. The outpost. Cave systems run under those cliffs. If we make it there, we've got a chance. They ran or stumbled, in her case across the broken terrain. Every step sent jolts of white-hot sensation through her limb, but adrenaline drowned hesitation. Behind them, the outpost erupted in a blossom of fire, the shockwaves slamming against her back like a hammer. Theo shielded her, his arm wrapping across her shoulders as debris rained down. When the roar faded, they didn't stop. Not until the yawning black of a cave swallowed them whole, its mouth veiled in creeping phosphorescent moss. The air inside was damp, rich with the metallic tongue of minerals. Strange fungi clung to the walls, glowing in soft blues and greens, casting pools of ghostlight across stone. Theo collapsed against a boulder, chest heaving, sweat streaking his grime-stained face. Alxie leaned against the wall, her biosynth limb, trembling from strain but holding. For a long moment, the only sound was their ragged breathing and the faint drip of water echoing deep in the cavern. Finally, Theo spoke, his voice hoarse. That was close. Alxie turned to him slowly. They will not stop, she said. Rian doctrine demands execution for contact with an enemy. Your people will call you deserter. Theo met her gaze without flinching. Then we keep running. The simplicity of it stunned her. No calculation. No strategy of gain. Just survival. Together. Her throat tightened, words clawing upward unbidden. Why didn't you leave me? His eyes softened, the gray of them catching the bioluminescent glow like fractured light on water. Because I couldn't. Her breath stuttered. She didn't understand this human, this man who moved against every law of logic and war. And yet, the pulse inside her, the heat flaring through her at the brush of his hand against hers, told her she didn't want to. In my culture, she said quietly, her voice like wind on crystal, touch is not casual. Theo froze. His hand hovered near hers, as though afraid to move, to break something fragile between them. What does it mean? Alxie's bioluminescent markings shimmered with an intensity she couldn't hide, patterns rippling in hues of violet and silver. It means, she whispered, her 6 fingers curling slowly to intertwine with his. We choose. His breath hitched, and for a suspended moment, time narrowed to the space between them. the warmth of his skin against hers, the glow painting their faces in alien light. Outside, the war raged on. Inside, in this cave carved from the bones of a silent planet, something new ignited Dot, and neither of them could turn away. The cave breathed with a damp chill, its walls glowing faintly with the pulse of alien fungi. For 2 days, they had hidden here, deep in a network of tunnels that twisted beneath Proxima's scarred surface like veins. Theo rigged motion sensors from scavenged outpost tech. They shared rations by the glow of the moss, speaking in hushed tones when they spoke at all. Alxi moved better now. The biosynth limb had become part of her, an elegant fusion of alloy and flesh that responded with increasing precision to her thoughts. Yet every movement reminded her of what she'd lost. And what she'd gained. Theo was kneeling near the heat module, coaxing life from its dwindling power cell. His profile glowed in the moss-like sharp lines softened by fatigue. His uniform clung damp to his frame, streaked with soot and blood. "You don't sleep?" she said quietly, from where she sat on a slab of stone, her voice carrying a faint musical undertone. "Neither do you," Theo replied without looking up. Then, after a beat, he did glance at her, a wry half-smile tugging his lips. "Guess some things are universal." She tilted her head, bioluminescent patterns shimmering faintly in the darkness. "Not all things." Her gaze fell to their joined Pax, his battered medkit resting against her polished combat harness, symbols of two worlds that would tear them apart if they knew. Theo followed her eyes, then spoke softly. "You ever think about what happens if we make it out of this?" Her throat tightened. It was a fragile thread, thinner than the hair-fine circuits in her new leg. "My people will kill me," she said simply, "not for failing. For this." Her fingers brushed the metal lattice that had replaced her limb, then shifted almost unconsciously to the memory of his hand against hers. Theo didn't look away. "And mine will throw me in a cell, or worse." His voice was flat, but his eyes burned. AWOL medic consorting with an enemy combatant? They'd call it treason. Then why stay? She whispered, her heart's pounding like war drums. His answer was a slow exhale, a confession stripped bare. "Because I'd rather die with you than live wondering if I could have done more." The silence after that wasn't empty. It thrummed with something alive, something neither of them had language for. When Theo's hand reached across the narrow gap, Alxi didn't hesitate. Her 6 fingers slid against his 5, alien geometry fitting like it had always belonged. Bioluminescent light rippled along her skin in waves she couldn't control. Theo's pupils dilated, his breath hitching as their foreheads touched a gesture of closeness foreign to her species, but instinctive to him. Heat flared where his lips brushed the ridged contour of her jaw, tentative and reverent. When their mouths met, it was a collision of world-soft human warmth against crystalline grace, impossibly different, yet devastatingly right. The cave held its breath as armor fell away, not metal plates, but walls of doctrine and fear, stripped until there was only skin and pulse, and the raw truth of survival made sacred by choice. They lay entwined in the moss light later, his arm curved protectively over her, her patterns dimming to slow, tender hues. For the first time since the mine, Alxi didn't feel broken. She felt claimed, not as property, as something worth crossing an entire war for. But dawn didn't wait for lovers. The first tremor came, just as she drifted toward sleep, a low vibration that teased the edges of awareness. Then another, stronger, rattling the cave walls. Theo was on his feet in an instant, snatching up the sensor rig. His face went pale under the green glow. "They found us," he said grimly. "Alxi's." Breath caught. "Rian scouts?" "Rian. And human." His voice was flat now, hard with disbelief. "They're working together." The words punched the air from her lungs. Two armies who had slaughtered each other for decades, now marching side by side, just to kill them. They see us as contagion, Alxi murmured, rising on her new leg, its alloy whispering softly. Proof that everything they told their soldiers was a lie. Theo's jaw clenched. Then we run. They snatched what they could medpack, rations, a coil of climbing cable, and plunged deeper into the cavern as the first concussive blasts shook the tunnels. Dust rained from the ceiling. Behind them, the entrance blossomed in fire. The labyrinth twisted tighter, narrowing to fissures that scraped armor and skin. Alxi's biosynth limb hummed as she forced it to obey, muscles screaming, lungs burning with acrid dust. Theo moved ahead, every breath a ragged oath. When the walls finally widened, it was into something neither had expected, a vast hollow chamber glowing with eerie light. Stalactites curved like teeth overhead, but what seized Alxi's gaze were the structures at the center, angular pillars etched with alien glyphs, slick with the patina of ages. This place was older than Rian conquest, older than human colonization. Theo's voice was a hoarse whisper. What the hell is this? Before she could answer, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A lattice of lights embedded in one of the pillars, pulsing faintly as if awakening. Then the ground shuddered, and a panel slid open, revealing a corridor lined with sterile white metal utterly unlike the stone. Alxi's heart slammed against her ribs. Not ruins, she breathed. Maintenance access. Theo's eyes widened. Guild Tech. The Galactic Commerce Guild, neutral, omnipresent, beholden to no military. If this was one of their autonomous mining hubs, then they had a chance. A sliver of hope carved into the bones of a dead world. Theo gripped her arm, urgency blazing in his gaze. Move, now. Behind them, the tunnels roared with approaching troops, boots pounding, voices barking in two languages once sworn never to mingle. Ahead, sterile light promised something that wasn't mercy, but wasn't annihilation either. Alxi took one last look at the cave, where something impossible had bloomed, then followed Theo into the unknown. Asterisk, the maintenance corridor was silent, but alive, a pulse of sterile white light running along its edges, a hum in the floor like the heartbeat of some vast machine. Alxi had never seen anything like it. Where the cave behind them dripped with mineral damp, this place smelled of ozone and oil. Theo's boots clanged softly against the metallic surface as they ran, his medpack slamming against his back in time with his breath. Guild architecture, he muttered, voice ragged from exhaustion. Automated mining hubs. These shafts run under contested zones. Alxi's heart hammered as her gaze swept the walls, tracing the flowing glyphs of maintenance protocols, scrolling across panels she couldn't read. Neutral space, her mind whispered. A concept as alien as compassion had once been. The hum deepened behind them. Theo glanced back, and his jaw clenched. Sensors picked us up. They'll breach the access in minutes. They will not stop, Alxi said, forcing her biosynth limb into a sprint. The alloy sang faintly with strain, but it held. Our species together. It is a wound they cannot allow to heal. Theo didn't answer. He grabbed her hand instead, 5 human fingers, locking tight with her 6 crystalline ones, and pulled her toward a bulkhead that loomed ahead. A security node pulsed red at its center, an iris of polished steel sealing the way. Theo dropped to his knees, hauling a cable from his back. If this works, he muttered, jacking into the node with fingers that shook from fatigue, but never faltered. Sparks spat in angry bursts as human hardware warred with guild encryption. The floor trembled again, this time with a sharper rhythm, the pounding boots of soldiers forcing their way into the corridor. Shadows stretched long and jagged as their lights cut through the haze behind them. Theo, Alxi warned, her voice a chord of urgency and fear. Her patterns flared violet across her skin. Almost a click. The iris spiraled open with A hiss of compressed air, and light poured through like liquid fire. Theo yanked the cable free, grabbed her hand, and they threw themselves into the brightness. The door sealed behind them with a slam that reverberated through the chamber beyond. Alxi blinked against the brilliance, her vision struggling to adjust. When the blur receded, her breath caught. The cavern they'd entered wasn't a cavern at all. It was a terminal sleek walkways spanning a yawning abyss, illuminated by streams of automated drones gliding along magnetic tracks. Platforms hummed, with cargo pods stamped with the sigil of the Galactic Commerce Guild. Above, a ceiling of glass revealed the stars. A spill of infinite silver across black velvet. Theo let out a low whistle. We just walked into a guild core node. His voice was a rasp of awe and dread. A new sound sliced through the stillness of voice, crisp and modulated, emanating from the air itself. Identify yourselves. Panels shimmered, and a figure coalesced in hard light at the walkway's edge. Tall, draped in a uniform of molten silver, its features hidden by a helm of mirrored glass. A guild sentinel security made FLESHLESS. Theo stepped forward, lifting empty hands. We're not hostiles, he said, his voice steady, though his pulse thudded visibly at his throat. Human combat medic, ID Maxwell code Alpha Bravo 97. And this is Alxi Vinzal of the Rian 4th Battalion. The sentinel's head tilted, reflective visor catching the light of 1,000 systems. A human and a Rian. Together. Explain. Alxi forced her trembling voice into clarity. We seek sanctuary. From whom? Theo's laugh was humorless. Take your pick. They're probably arguing over who gets to kill us first. Silence stretched, humming like a blade unsheathed. Then, without warning, the sentinel spoke again. Follow. Do not deviate. They obeyed. What choice did they have? The sentinel led them through a maze of transparent corridors, suspended over a gulf of machinery, until they reached a chamber so pristine, it seemed carved from light itself. There, waiting, was something even stranger than the sentinel. A figure whose silhouette flowed like mercury, limbs jointed in ways that defied symmetry. Its voice was neither male nor female, but layered, harmonic. I am Vess, it said. Guild Coordinator for Sector 44. You have crossed into Sovereign Guild territory. Under neutrality protocols, you are safe from military reprisal, for now. Theo exhaled shakily. Thank you. Vess's head tilted, insectile elegance catching the sterile light. You assume gratitude is relevant. It is not. Your situation is unprecedented. Two species locked in genocidal conflict, now joined in what appears to be mutual attachment. The creature's multifaceted gaze fixed on their clasped hands. Fascinating. Alxi drew herself taller, her patterns brightening with something like defiance. We did not come to be studied. No, Vess agreed. You came because you have nowhere else to go. Theo's jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. What happens now? What happens? Vess said, voice a ripple of static song. Is that you disappear? Officially, you died on Proxima B9. Unofficially, you will live in a guild autonomous zone. If you choose? Theo glanced at Alxi. Her faceted eyes met his, and in that moment, the question had only one answer. We? Choose, she said softly. 6 months later, Haven didn't feel like exile. It felt like something the war had never given them peace. The settlement sprawled beneath a dome of shimmering glass, gardens blooming alongside corridors of alloy. Children of a dozen species darted between crystalline towers, their laughter echoing like bells. And among them, unnoticed, walked a human and a Rion, their fingers entwined. Theo had traded combat blues for civilian gray, though the med insignia gleamed still on his sleeve. Alxi moved with grace on her biosynth limb, the alloy pulsing in harmony with her natural bioluminescence. Where once she had flickered in despair, now her patterns glowed with slow, steady warmth. But peace was not the only new thing. That night, in the quiet of their shared quarters overlooking Haven's central garden, Alxie stood by the viewport, stars spilling silver across her skin. Theo came up behind her, arms circling her waist, his breath warm against the ridge of her jaw. "You're quiet," he murmured. "There is something you must know," she said, her voice trembling like crystal under strain. He stilled. "Alxie?" She turned to face him, her bioluminescent patterns rippling in hues he had never seen before, soft gold, spiraling into deep violet. Slowly, she guided his hand to her abdomen. Beneath his palm, a faint warmth thrummed a pulse, not hers, but something new. Theo's breath hitched. His eyes widened, wonder breaking across his face like dawn. "Is that a beginning?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Neither human nor Wien, something beyond both." For a long, perfect moment, silence reigned broken, only by the distant murmur of Haven's gardens, the hum of life continuing beyond war. Then Theo laughed, soft and disbelieving, pulling her close until their foreheads touched. "A new species," he said, awe threading every word. "A new chance." Outside the viewport, a ship slipped between stars, carrying the last whispers of two armies still clinging to hate. But here, in the arms of an enemy who was no longer an enemy, something greater had begun, something no war could stop. And far below, in the quiet soil of Proxima B9, the bones of old battles slept beneath. A sky that no longer belonged to death, but to the fragile, impossible bloom of hope. End asterisk.